Yes, that's a
Uh,
lot of peas.
let's pray it doesn't paint us as a pair of problematic pariahs. All right. So, Crian, would you like to go ahead and introduce us?
And with that, allow me to welcome you to episode 6 of a podcast where today we will be eschewing the rules of polite company and talking about, you guessed it, politics and games. But before we go down that rabbit hole, Adam, would you like to fill us in on what you've been playing this week?
All right. Well, I'm going to cheat again. I have not had a lot of time to play this week. As you might have noticed, I have some things here on my face. Had to go for a biopsy. Also, my wife is on vacation this week, which means she's at home and occupying the TV. So I'm going to kind of go back a little bit into the past, and not too recently, but earlier this year, I was playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I'm going to be reviewing that. So as you know, obviously the game is going to be Final Fantasy VII Remake. All right, this is created by Square Enix, and this is a reimagining, but also a updated graphically version of the original 1997 game, Final Fantasy VII. So this was released on March 2020. It was supposed to come out a little bit earlier than that, but then
These sewer rats appear to call themselves Avalanche, sir.
So the original Final Fantasy.
You can have it for saving my life.
It's only going to be taking place in the first portion of the original Final Fantasy.
You think he's a keeper?
This is
Y'all gotta look at the bigger picture here. Nothing worth fighting for was ever won without sacrifice.
Help me!
obviously this being in parts. It's not one complete Final Fantasy VII like the original. They're doing this in parts, so they do have to kind of introduce certain characters a little bit earlier to kind of give you that hook, because otherwise you might have this character popping in section 3, which, you know, new players might be like, who's this guy, why do I care? Whereas people from the original game would have known that because that was their natural introduction. But gameplay wise, they've changed quite a bit. So the old school Final Fantasies were what they called ATB, or active time battle. And what that basically meant was it was a variation of turn based, where traditional turn based is I take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn, similar to tabletop games like D&D and that sort of thing. Well, what active time battle does is you basically just have a little bar that'll charge up, and that's based on your character's speed stat. And when that bar is full, then your character can take an action. So faster characters are acting more often, slower characters are acting less often, and of course you can augment that with spells like haste or slow. Now the game has gone more into an action kind of game. So everything's in real time, you attack in real time and all that. But obviously fans of the original game were very, very adamant that they really wanted active time battle, especially the old school fans. Okay. Now they wanted to bring it into the modern era, but they also wanted to kind of appease those old fans. So what they've done is they've created kind of this hybrid action active time battle system. And what happens is basically your character can auto attack at any time, as just like you would in, say, Legend of Zelda or Devil May Cry. So you're always doing your auto attacks, and what those will do is charge up your active time battle bar. It'll naturally charge slowly, but every time you attack an enemy, it'll give it kind of a little boost. And then when that's full, then you can use all your extra abilities. So that's when you can use an item, you can cast a spell, or now characters have a lot of unique abilities to them that really separate the way they play. So you can activate those abilities as well. There are some plot changes. Like I said, they do add in some characters a little bit earlier than you might normally see them. I wasn't a huge fan of that, being a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. I would have preferred that they had stuck with the original story, but then at the same time, I get it. You know, they want to bring in that new market, not just appeal to the nostalgia. But what I do like is that they do expand some of the minor characters quite a bit. In the original game, you have 3 characters that help you out, Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, and they're just kind of there for a while. And, and then they're gone. But here they kind of expand them out, so we get a little bit of background on them. We know what their hobbies are. We meet one of their families. So they do kind of expand a lot of these minor characters quite a bit. Moving forward, it's kind of up in the air. The way they ended it was they pretty much followed the Midgar plot, but then they've kind of left it open as to one of the key themes of this is destiny versus choice. And destiny representing the original arc of the original game. Do we follow destiny? Do we follow the way things are intended to go? Do we follow the original beat of the game versus choice? Are we able to do things differently? And so it'd be interesting to see how they go with that. Are these characters really going to follow their destiny and the original canon storyline, or are they going to follow their choices and kind of branch out and do something different from what they originally did? So it will be interesting to see where they go with that moving forward. If I were to recommend this to somebody, I would recommend it to somebody who's a fan of the action RPG kind of genre. It's not going to be as intensive as, say, something like Nier Automata or Bayonetta or Devil May Cry, but it does add a unique flavor with this active time battle RPG kind of element. I would also highly recommend it for nostalgic Final Fantasy VII fans, although do be cautious and temper your expectations because they do change a few things that might make some people kind of irritated. And then also, like I said, going forward, it looks like they might not necessarily do all the same things. So it is something to kind of watch out for if you're one of those hardcore, like, canon kind of people. I would also recommend this for younger people. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII is a huge influential game. It's kind of I would say Final Fantasy VII is to RPGs what Halo is to first-person shooters, in that RPGs were kind of niche, and then with Final Fantasy VII, they kind of ballooned out and became this huge thing and kind of became the kind of a main market kind of genre, in the same sense that first-person shooters were kind of a PC niche thing. And then when Halo came out, suddenly, wait, we can have shooters on consoles? I mean, we had them with like GoldenEye, but Halo was really the one that brought that out. So for younger people who've heard of this game but never really played it, and it has not aged well graphically, so I know a lot of younger people are looking at it and they're like, oh my God, how did you ever survive this? What is that square? Then I would definitely recommend that they use this as kind of an entry-level thing. So yeah. So I'm going to open the floor for questions because I know Crian usually has some.
I always do. Thinking about this, because when Final Fantasy VII, the original, came out, I watched my roommate play it back when I was living in Massachusetts. Comparing the remake to the original, in the Adam Gray scale, 10 being great, 0 being terrible, what would you give the remake compared to the original?
See, it's so hard to gauge that because in a way, I almost feel like they're not even really that comparable. The Final Fantasy VII was definitely a product of its time. And that's why if you look back graphically, I mean, the characters have these weird Popeye arms, and this is graphically beautiful. Back then, it was not graphically beautiful. It was even by back then standards, it was kind of goofy looking. And it has not aged as well as some of even like Final Fantasy VI, which is sprite based and 2D, has aged better than Final Fantasy VII, which was fully 3D. As far as gameplay, I at first wasn't really into the action RPG thing because it was very different than what I wanted, but it did kind of grow on me. But as far as comparing them, I would say look at this as kind of an example of the Terminator movies where they all kind of are part of the same universe, but each one doesn't necessarily have to associate with the other one because of weird time loops and things like that. So I would say kind of look at it that way. They're both part of the Final Fantasy VII compilation, but I would look at them as two distinct different games. I wouldn't really compare them. I would compare their parallels, but yeah. But as far as fun, I would say it was definitely worth playing for me.
Okay. I mean, that's what I wanted to know. I really would like to get into Final Fantasy. I was telling Adam Before, I really want to play the Crystal Chronicles because it's out on Switch, but I just gotta wait for it to be on sale.
Yeah. On a side note, let me. I realized that I did this here. I didn't have my background up. All right, so if you can see my background now, where is it? Let me lean this way. You can see here. This is my. I bought the first class edition, the collector's edition. Final Fantasy VII is extremely important to me, so I have right here my collector's edition cloud model. So
That's cool.
so yeah. So I mean, I definitely am not the person to ask because I have a very clear bias. So
Sometimes that's the best person to ask, you know, the people who are biased towards it can give you the most information.
well, they give you the best sell anyway. So, what about you? What have you been playing?
Well, I have continued my trend of bouncing around games. And let me switch back to me. And I streamed this on Monday. It is called Shadowrun Dragonfall. Where is the game? Here, in our little viewing box, you'll see me. This is my stream from Monday. The quality is not great because it was streamed on Facebook. Facebook only allows you to download the standard definition of your actual video. So bear with me. But Shadowrun Dragonfall, the director's cut, it was released by a company called Harebrained Schemes. You would know them from Shadowrun Hong Kong.
Hello, everybody. This is Crian from Middle Age Gaming. Today I am playing Shadowrun Dragonfall, the director's cut.
That being said, I am
as I said in the title, I played this before, and I played it when it first came out. But I only played it for
but the models themselves
or so,
like
according
I
to my
looked up
Steam.
my character closely
And
the stream, and he looks
so,
like
yep,
very
that's
similar.
just the way it is.
So
About
the
today,
game,
we're gonna give it a
it
go. I was
looks
trying to think
great.
of what I wanted
I
to
love the way
play.
it looks a lot.
And
there's
I
lots
decided,
of dialogue.
well,
I
I'll
was
just
telling
give
Adam
this a
at
go
work
because I wanted
yesterday
something like
that.
that.
I started reading the dialogue during the stream, and I
Relatively
just couldn't do it
easygoing.
because there's just so much of text. But in Monday, it
And-
really fit
and
my
just
mood.
bear with
I
me,
was
I'm
looking for
trying to
something, not as stressful
open
as
my
an FPS
Facebook
in terms of
dashboard so I
shooting
can
and
keep an
moving
eye on
around and not
chat
too much thinking involved.
while you guys are
There are
while we
dialogue
playing.
choices in this game, so dialogue really influences
The
the way you deal with other characters, the outcomes of
and
relationships and events.
I can go into full screen.
Combat was quite difficult. I played the tutorial mission
Where's
on
my
Monday.
stream?
I will put notes in our stream
Show
notes
that
today,
video
so you can go watch that stream if you
There
want.
we are.
I
Hopefully you
did
guys
the
can
tutorial
hear me
mission and some
loud
other stuff
and
like
clear,
fetch
and
quests
everything is
on
loud.
Monday. If you don't know what Shadowrun is, Shadowrun
Alright,
is
so
a
I have
tabletop RPG
really
system
forgotten how to
that
play
was
this.
created.
And I'm like,
similar to Warhammer 40k.
Alright, so
It's
let's
a
go
world
here.
in which
let me know if
elves
this
and
is too
trolls
small.
and that kind of stuff, they
Confirm.
come back to life. And
Because I'm
I
playing
was
this
gonna say
at
come back to life is the
4K,
wrong
I could
word.
go down
They
to
come
1080.
back into society again, and the world freaks out. And Shadowrun is set
Anyway,
in
so it says so far so
2050s
good. If
or
your skirmish with
2040s,
security
where
set up any
technology
alarms,
and
you don't
magic
hear them.
sort of coexist.
Monica leads the rest of the team
and,
down
there
into
used to
the
be
basement
dragons
of
in
Harper Man.
2021.
Pay
Next
this
year,
week,
who
the
knows,
date
we
of
might be
vault
lucky.
lies ahead.
So that's
Okay,
pretty
oh,
much
this looks a bit
Shadowrun.
better.
I definitely say it's someone
That's a
who's
bit
looking for something low
leap
stress, as
bigger than
it doesn't
on
really
the
require a
schematic.
lot out of you.
Schematic didn't
You
have
do
a
need to
date. Our client
think
may
about
have
your
old
decisions.
intel. Still,
But
our
it's
instructions
not a
were clear.
game
The
where you
data
feel
we're
like I have
looking
to
for
make the
should
right
be
choice,
just on
because you
the
can
other
always
side
go
of the
back
door.
and load again.
Monica
like I
combs the hand through her
typically
hair,
save scum
parting
in
it
these
to
games,
reveal the black
that's just
plastic
me.
sheath of her jet.
You also need to
A
have the
quick
patience
jaunt
to
into
read
the
all
matrix
the
of your
dialogue,
digital
even if
hand
you're not
waving,
reading
and
it
I'll
out
have
loud,
this thing
because
right
a
up
lot of
your
this
back.
stuff has details about the
Burst of
universe,
static crackles
about
through
the
the tiny
people you're
speaker of
interacting
Monica's
with,
com.
about their feelings
Still in
towards you.
position outside the estate.
And
Hold on,
but
Monica. Who's in charge
at the
while
end of
we're
the day, if
jacked
you're
in?
looking for something turn-based,
Monica rolled
because
her
it's
eyes.
very similar
Dietrich
to
fixes
XCOM
his
in a
stare
way.
intently on the vault.
Difficult,
Glory
but
looks
similar.
cold and distant,
With lots
just
of dialogue.
as
It does have that sort of
she always does.
thing Adam and I talked about in a previous
Glory.
episode, where you could be standing in front of someone.
We've been through this
and,
before, Ika. You're not in the
throwing
KSK
knife at them,
and the
and
chain of
realistically,
command
if you're in front of
nonsense
someone, you should be
doesn't
able to
fly
hit them
in the
100% of the time. But
You don't need rules and regulations to guide
irritating.
us. The same principles that
So
apply
Adam, what do you think of
to the
Shadowrun?
Flux Estate.
So gameplay wise, this is kind of
Spare
a
me the lecture.
SRPG,
Politics and nothing to do with this.
or is this more like a Diablo
Let's get
style
used to
thing?
it.
Or?
It's very XCOM-like, turn-based strategy.
here's our
So you
first
go,
choice.
enemies go, you go, enemies go. You have a abilities, you have medikits.
I'm wondering if we should change the
you
resolution.
have
'cause
guns, and you have like
kinda
magical.
small.
Like I
Let's see.
shot somebody, and
we
then I
can
threw a
change
bolt of
the
lightning at the same
resolution.
time.
That sounds complicated.
Perspective,
I was worried about the complexity of it.
Ooh, better.
The
Ooh,
stats,
much
I would
better.
say, are complex
Okay.
because it's like strength, dexterity, stamina, all the
That
stuff
looks
that
much
like,
better. Okay.
some
okay.
casual gamers.
Hope you
don't
guys
like.
appreciate that.
But
Oh,
that stuff you don't need
somebody
to
is
focus on
watching.
too
Hello,
much. The combat
wherever
is
you
very
are.
much XCOM like. So if you
I guess that could be
XCOM
me.
combat, you can play. All right, so
Okay.
yes, it's
One question. I'm actually looking at your
I guess
notes
right,
here.
Monica, we should just take a
On
second
one note,
to
you say
investigate
combat is
these.
quite difficult, and
I
you almost
agree.
didn't pass the tutorial. But then
Someone
later
needs to
on, you
take
say
charge
it's
here,
definitely
what
for someone who's looking for
Uh,
low
we
stress.
don't
So I
have time for
mean,
this
wouldn't
right now. We have a
difficult
job to do.
combat
Decking
typically
two.
lead to
Why
a
don't I
stressful
take a
game,
crack at
or
this one?
how
Let me
does
show
that
you what I
really?
can do.
How do you see the balance there?
Obviously, I
I
can't
mean,
do
in
that.
me, in the sense like if you're playing an FPS, you're playing
so,
an ARPG, right?
I mean, I'm the kind of
you
person who
couldn't
likes
save at a certain point,
order.
and you go into
So,
different combat
let's go with
situations,
this.
you're likely to feel frustrated.
Alright, Monica
because you
stares
can
at you for a
literally,
moment,
just
clearly
like in XCOM,
irritated. Then a little
did it all
twinkle
the
appears in
time,
her eye
right?
again. She
Saved
smiles at you
after
as she
every
speaks into
turn.
her.
And every time the
Very well, we'll
outcome
do this
didn't
one.
work,
I
I'm
guess.
like,
Well,
okay,
I'm
reload.
jacked in
No,
Crian
this
is
guy
in
can't
charge.
die. I
Oh
love
yeah,
him
I'm in
too
charge.
much.
There's a pause. Then I guess
Okay,
what's
yeah, I
Chronicles
did
up
the
to
same thing
Crian.
for
Did I hear
Valkyria
you
Chronicles
right?
4.
You're putting the rookie in command?
Got to A rank
I'm the
everything.
rookie Iker, and you
All right.
don't.
Well, yeah, it sounds really interesting. Unfortunately,
You
it's
heard
kind
what
of
I
hard
said,
to see the
Iker.
graphics
This
here.
is
You would say the graphics
ridiculous.
hold up pretty well
Know
for a
that
game
this
from
is a joke to you,
2014?
Monica, but I'm
or-
telling you,
I mean, they have
Monica's
4K
tone is
textures
opus.
in the
Evidently,
game,
she has
so
heard
the
enough.
maps
Decisions
themselves look
made. You
great,
have your answer.
and when you
Without
playing
another
the
word,
game,
Iker's
the
image flickers
characters
and fades from
look
Monica's
nice in
communicator.
sort of the isometric view.
Sorry about
but,
that. Iker
when
can
you
be
look at the character
inflexible.
sheet,
The
the
legacy of a
actual
long military
close-up
career,
character
but she
models,
knows what she's doing and she means
almost
well.
about halfway through the stream.
It's a
not that you
legitimate
can actually
concern. She
see
hardly
that, but,
knows me. There's a
the
thin
character
line
models
between
don't
concern
look
and
that
insubordination.
great.
You let me know if she crosses.
Ah, okay.
Okay,
I
now
guess
chill,
it's
let's
similar
get this
to
done.
Divinity in that
See you on
sense,
the
where
other side.
you're
She
not supposed
punches
to be looking at them
projects
real
her
close up.
consciousness into cyberspace. Her fingers